Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. Want to remind everybody, hit that like, share, and subscribe button for me. There's a PayPal link down below for anybody that wants to share some love, and the StreamYard link is there for anybody who wants to share some love. Or excuse me, come up on panel. We're going to talk tonight about the Lawyers Guild. I mentioned recently about the incident with my last court case with the local county court here in regards to the traffic citation that I got a possession charge for 8 years ago. And when I went in that courtroom, I was cussing at them, swearing at them, all kinds of stuff, called them communists. And I related that to the 81st Congress, in where the Congress had investigated the Lawyers Guild and determined that by definition they were communists. So we're going to look over documents here today. Let me pull it up. And this is the Bulwark. This is Union Calendar number 1078, 81st Congress, second session. Okay. House Report number 3123. Report on the National Lawyers Guild Legal Bulwark of the Communist Party, September 17th, 1950. Okay. And it says here, the National Lawyers Guild is the foremost legal bulwark of the Communist Party, its front organizations, and controlled unions. Since its inception, it has never failed to rally to the legal defense of the Communist Party and individual members thereof, including known espionage agents. It has consistently fought against national, state, and local legislation aimed at curbing the communist conspiracy. It has been most articulate in its attacks upon all agencies of the government seeking to expose or prosecute the subversive activities of the communist network, including national, state, and local investigative committees, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and law enforcement agencies generally. Through its affiliation with the International Association of Democratic Lawyers, an international communist front organization, the National Lawyers Guild has constituted itself an agent of a foreign principal hostile to the interests of the United States. It has gone far afield to oppose the foreign policies of the United States in line with the current line of the Soviet Union. Now, you got to remember, this is back in 1950, so we're talking about past tense here. These aims, the real aims of the National Lawyers Guild, as demonstrated conclusively by its activities for the past 13 years of its existence, are not specified in its constitution or statement of avowed purpose. In order to attract non-communists to serve as a cover for its actual purpose as an appendage to the Communist Party, the National Lawyers Guild poses benevolently as a professional organization which shall function as an effective social force in the service of the people to the end that human rights shall be regarded as more sacred than property rights. In the entire history of the Guild, there is no record of its ever having condemned such instances of the violation of human rights as found in Soviet labor camps and in the series of Moscow trials which shocked the civilized world. You remember, they're the ones that had that Bolshevik front that accosted the Jews in their territory before Hitler did. That's what we're talking about, is that prior history. The National Lawyers Guild was formally organized at a convention held in the Washington Hotel in Washington, D.C. on February 12th to the 22nd, 1937. National headquarters were established in the nation's capital, where they remain today. Again, this is 1950. We would have to do some research, find out whether they're even on American soil anymore. Communists publicly hailed the founding of the National Lawyers Guild. Newsmasses, a weekly publication of the Communist Party, featured an article entitled "Defense for the Council: The Need for the National Lawyers Guild" in its issue of June 14, 1938, pages 19 through 21. This article, written by Charles Recht, an attorney for the Soviet government and a member of the Guild, observed that with the growth of the American Labor Party in New York and kindred progressive movements throughout the United States, the lawyers, who in many of the smaller communities are the nerve centers of political activities, will be an invaluable aid in galvanizing the latent liberal elements of the country into a political force. So in case you guys don't understand what's going on there, this was an intent back in them days to bring this liberalization that we see today, this transgenderism, this thing that people seem to think that they can impose their liberal views on you and say that you have to abide by them. It comes from a communist agenda. Okay? Understand that first and foremost. Then understand that this is a military government. And this military government uses commerce as its driving mechanism, that supply and demand chain. And it's only because you keep demanding it that they keep supplying it. And remember, they already know they're not supposed to cast pearl before the swine. The National Lawyers Guild can and will form one of the most important adjuncts to a progressive movement representing the interests of the workers and farmers. Supposedly, huh? The International Labor Defense, which was cited by former Attorney General Francis Biddle as the legal arm of the Communist Party, also enthusiastically welcomed the new front, the National Lawyers Guild. The ILD stated in its 1936-37 yearbook that the emergence of the National Lawyers Guild is regarded by the International Labor Defense as a heartening expression of the devotion of thousands of American attorneys to the American principle of democracy. See, this goes again to that fact that we were promised a republic. And you have a republic if you can keep it. And I'm going to point out here that I think the problem with people losing that republic is they don't understand that First and Second Amendment, the freedom of association. And that freedom of association relates to the 10th Amendment in the powers. See, the powers that were so delegated to the United States in that Constitution, but not prohibited by that Constitution, therefore are reserved to the states or the people. And that's where the inherent power, political power of the government comes from, is the consent of the people. And in that consent of the people, if you don't consent to be governed, you have the right of that association, and that right of association outside of that military government is that Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. In case that government does become despotic and you need to help throw it off, as well as in case that military government needs home front defense on this land. Two very important elements that I think a lot of people don't even think about, let alone comprehend. If you want to be able to support the government, you have to know how that government runs. If that government is not operating accordingly, then you need to be able to throw it off when it becomes despotic. That means you have to know how to replace it. That's a lot of elements. The better proposition as we have in these modern times, in my opinion, is to go ahead and throw off that despotic government, but not by going up against it as a militia. Of course, we still need that militia. That is the inherent power of the people. But the more homebound remedy is the fact of that freedom of association and learning how to use that instrumentality of negotiable instruments. See, when it comes to the factors of war, once a war starts, the next thing that is sought is peace. One is the building of a government. Once that government is built, the next thing that is sought is anybody that's against that government. And that's what we have today is this. Everybody hears about this one world government. They think it's coming. It was already here a long time ago. Like I said, that's the Postal Union, Her Majesty's Royal Warrant Holders Association. If you aren't holding a warrant, then it's being sold. That's what we were talking about with the indemnification stuff. So let's get back into it. Okay, so it says, and a concrete step on their part in the struggle to maintain and enlarge democratic rights. And again, let me pose the fallacy of a democracy is that when you believe a democracy exists at 50 to 49, where you got, or excuse me, 51 to 49, you got 51% of the vote here and 49% of the vote here, so the majority wins. The problem is that's a very unique position in a balance that can be overturned very easily. Very easily. It only takes 2%. It takes 1% change to equalize it, 2% to change it in the opposing direction. That's a very fine line. That's a far distance from a republic where the government knows in its little bitty 2% of population, the other 98% of the population is the one that has the power. That's a republic. When that is recognized, when that is respected, when that 9th and 10th Amendment are respected in that we have greater rights than any government, and that's where they get their privileges. Earl Browder, testifying before the House Committee on Un-American Activities on September 6, 1939, in his capacity as General Secretary of the Communist Party, admitted that the National Lawyers Guild was a communist transmission belt. This has been corroborated by Louis F. Boudens, former member of the National Committee of the Communist Party and one-time managing editor of its official newspaper, The Daily Worker. Testifying before the House Committee on Un-American Activities on April 3, 1946, Mr. Boudens described the National Lawyers Guild as a working ally of the Communist Party and stated that members of the Guild would be under the influence of the party, while officers would be communists or fellow travelers. So they were members of the Guild that would be under the influence of the party, while the officers would be communists or fellow travelers. Testifying again before the committee on July 20th, 1948, Mr. Boudens said, in the National Lawyers Guild, there is a complete duplicate of the Communist Party's hopes and aspirations in that field, although there are a number of non-communists in the Lawyers Guild. They claim to be non-communists, but they follow the same communist script. In fact, some locally are not communists, but but they play the communist game either wittingly or unwittingly. So, while they claim to be non-communists, they are in fact following a communist agenda, whether they know it or not. The National Lawyers Guild, as an organization, has intervened in the major court cases which have involved individual communist leaders or officials of communist front organizations or unions. In every instance, the Guild has interceded on the communist side. And so what they're talking about here is what they mentioned earlier, that even against human rights. So when the communists committed acts against human rights, they still stood up for the communist, as opposed to what they state is their main goal is to stand up for human rights. Okay? So they conflict themselves. The Guild submitted a brief amicus curiae in the case of Robert Wood, an Oklahoma communist official who was convicted of criminal syndicalism in that state in 1940. When in the same year, avowed communist Ben Gold and other leaders of the communist-controlled Fur and Leather Workers Union were convicted in court of using terrorism in the labor field. That's a violation of human rights, and it makes it look like slavery, doesn't it? One of the most egregious things about violating human rights is making another man a slave. And yet here they are, they're going to stand up for this company. The National Lawyers Guild again appeared as a friend of the court on behalf of the defendants. A resolution opposing deportation proceedings against communist Harry Bridges was adopted by the 5th Convention of the National Lawyers Guild in 1941. The Guild also submitted a brief amicus curiae in the case. In recent years, the National Guild, or Lawyers Guild, has intervened as amicus curiae on behalf of the following leaders, leading communists. And it goes from here. Gerhard Eisler, remember him? Goes all the way down here. Just in a certain number of years, all these cases, and you can look them all up. Matter of fact, let me drop this down in the chat for everybody real quick before I forget. That way you guys can pull this up and take a peek yourself. It goes on to say the committee is reproducing below a list of National Lawyers Guild members who have represented witnesses before the Committee on Un-American Activities. In each case, the witnesses have refused to answer questions regarding communist affiliations propounded by the committee. In a number of the cases, espionage activities were involved. It should be noted in this connection that it is standard communist practice to accept as attorneys only those who agree to abide by the party's propaganda and conspirative directives. Once you guys understand that's what's happening in today's American Bar Association, I don't give a fuck what they say. Hiring an attorney proves one is incompetent. Proves that you don't know their agenda. Because surely if you knew their agenda, you would know they act just like communists. They're here to take your property, and they don't give a fuck about your human rights. Hiring an attorney proves one is incompetent. Remember that. Cases are known where attorneys who have volunteered their services have been summarily rejected because they would not become partners to the party's ulterior motive. All this. The National Lawyers Guild. The committee does not dispute the right of witnesses appearing before it to have the benefit of counsel. However, the committee believes that the attorneys mentioned above knowingly or unknowingly function under a directive issued by the Central Control Command cooperating, let me make sure that's communist, I think. Yeah. Central Control Communist cooperating with the committee when subpoenaed before it. Cases are known where persons subpoenaed before the committee indicated a willingness to cooperate with the committee. But when these persons consulted certain of the attorneys listed above, they refused to answer questions put to them by the committee. Contempt for American courts. Contempt for American courts. Fraud upon the American courts. And again, I'm not accusing anybody. The real nature of the Guild's philosophy comes into sharp focus during court procedures. Almost without exception, its leading members, despite their oath as lawyers to uphold the dignity of the court and respect the constitutional morals of jurisprudence, seek to bring the courts and its procedures into disrepute. They substitute insult for argument, resort to intimidation of judges by picket lines. Okay, understand this labor union stuff, folks. Who is the guy that was supposedly buried under the stadium? What's his name? Somebody help me out there down there in chat. The mob boss. Greetings, Mitchell. How you doing tonight? Or not the mob boss, the labor union boss. Go ahead, Mitch.
Yeah, I'm not sure who you're referring to, but yeah, good to see you, man.
Thanks for coming up again. What do you think so far? This sound familiar?
I actually just got here, so.
Oh, okay. There you go. Thanks, Christopher Real. Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa, he was the labor union leader. They buried him for a reason, folks. They buried him for a reason. So what we're talking about, Mitch, is I mentioned that in my case 8 years ago, I was cussing and swearing at him, calling them all kinds of names, and I called them communist bastards because of the 81st Congress, second section, talking about how they're the Lawyers Guild was determined to be foreign agents of the bar and were thus defined as communists. And today we have the American Bar Association, which of course was around back then as well. They had the Lawyers Guild and the American Bar Association, but I'm correlating it to today's American Bar Association doing the exact same thing. They're taking your property and denying you your human rights. That's communist. I don't care how you look. That's a basic, simple thing about communists. Take your property and deny your human rights. So I'm reading directly from that, and I dropped a link down in the chat. Let me drop it in the back chat for you. That way you can read this whole thing. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but there's plenty of That is speculation that he is part of a giant stadium in the concrete. Yep, absolutely. So let's continue on. The intimidation of judges by picket lines, parades, and personal abuse. In other words, these leaders of the National Lawyers Guild have followed standard communist practice, which provides that a communist must utilize a political trial to help on the revolutionary struggle. And that's what they're doing. These are political subdivisions, okay? And they're counting you as a resident, because that's what everybody's been claiming all their life, a resident of a political subdivision. And therefore, you're of a political venue, and therefore, they're going to politicize everything. And that's what the political campaign is all about, is smear tactics. That's why you go to court. It's a smear tactic. It's a political subdivision with a smear tactic to make sure that, only certain people will be kings. In a popularity contest I want no part of, go ahead. Just leave me out of it. That's all I ask. I don't think that's too hard to do. And like I said, that's that freedom of association through the First and Second Amendment and Ninth and 10th Amendments. Got to learn how the government is structured, who gives it power, and who takes that power away, and how. Goes on. Our tactics in the public proceedings of the law courts are not tactics of defense, but of attack. Without clinging to legal formalities, the communist must use the trial as a means of bringing his indictments against the dominant capitalist regime and of courageously voicing the views of his party. Federal Judge Harold Medina, in citing for contempt the attorneys who defended the 11 communists convicted in New York of advocating to overthrow the United States government by force and violence, noted the frequent and deliberate efforts of the part of the Guild attorneys to inject communist propaganda into the trial. Medina handed down sentences of contempt of court to the following attorneys for the communists, all of whom are members of the National Lawyers Guild. Richard Gladstein, 6 months. George Crockett, 4 months. Maurice Sugar, 30 days. Louis McCabe, 4 months. Abraham Isserman, 4 months. Harry Sacker, 6 months. Abraham Pomerantz, a member of the Guild, appeared as defense attorney for Valentin Gubachev, a Russian charged with spying against the United States. Pomerantz based most of his questions on notes passed to him by a representative of the Soviet embassy, seated at his side during the trial. The Russian official, an agent of the NKV, Soviet secret police, named Novikov, literally staged and managed the Gubachev defense, a procedure without precedent in the United States court history. In other words, they let a communist come in and guide the show in a American court. That is pretty astounding, isn't it? Let's see. Harry Sacker, not Harry Sacker. That is pretty close, though, isn't it? Not only has the behavior of Guild attorneys been noted officially by several federal judges, but the American Bar Association in 1949 received from its Board of Governors a recommendation that the American Bar Association bar from membership any person holding membership in the National Lawyers Guild. The action was based on the grounds that Guild lawyers held beliefs incompatible with membership in the American Bar Association. So we'll have to find out if that actually went through. The National Lawyers Guild attacks on the FBI. Any action on legislative or executive levels of the government which tends to interfere with the communist fifth column operations in this country is guaranteed to evoke a vicious campaign of opposition from the National Lawyers Guild. A striking example is the present attack by the Guild on the Federal Bureau of Investigation, echoing the current line of the Daily Worker in Moscow. The Guild today is crying for an investigation of the FBI, the vigilant guardian of our national security, on the ridiculous grounds that it is a Gestapo or political police. whose practices and policies threaten our democracy. And that's exactly what it is. It is a threat, but it's not a threat to the democracy. The democracy is a threat to the republic nature of our government that we're supposed to have. So what I'm posing is that this supposed democracy, again, is brought in because of the bar. And it doesn't matter if it's the Bar Association or the Lawyers Guild. It still has the same intent. They're just not stating it openly as communist, but you can see it follows the same communist lines, just like Congress is saying here that the Lawyers Guild follows communist lines. Today's American Bar Association is following those same lines. And I don't care by what method. I don't care if they're just doing their job. I don't care if they're doing it because that's what they were taught in college. What I care about is that they're operating without using their conscience and their morals. Any action on legislative or executive, a striking example, They missed something here. There's something struck out here. I don't know what that is. This attack was timed simultaneously with the tactics employed by the defense in the espionage case involving Judith Copeland. This campaign is simply an intensification of a long-standing Guild effort to discredit and vitiate the Federal Bureau of Investigation. At its 5th annual convention in 1941, the Guild also took action opposing the Gestapo activities of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. So what they're doing here is they're claiming the FBI is committing Gestapo activities, which today I can see. I don't know about it at that time, but it's a tit for tat, quid pro quo, ad hominem attack game. That's all they're doing. At that time, the Guild called for removal of FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, demanded that Congress reduce the FBI appropriation, and registered opposition to a pending appropriation bill to allot that Bureau $100,000 for the investigation of so-called subversive activities of government employers. J. Edgar Hoover, testifying on February 7, 1950, before a Senate subcommittee on appropriations, noted that the National Lawyers Guild has vociferously denounced the FBI since 1940. Mr. Hoover quoted a Guild member as having stated the following at a meeting of this front organization in 1940. If we keep up the constant criticism of the FBI and of Hoover, and if this criticism is systematically kept up and followed all the time, particularly by organizations, it can and will weaken the power of the FBI and hamper them very effectively. This is what they're using against the very people. It's the same concept. They keep fear-mongering. That's a communist tactic as well. If we keep up the constant criticism of the people, and if the criticism is systematically kept up and followed all the time, particularly by organizations of government, it can and it will weaken the power of the people and hamper them very effectively. That's the way I read it. They're doing the exact same thing to the people of the very nation that they pose as such a strong nation. How can the nation be strong again if they don't have the comprehension reading level of of anything but a 7th or 8th grade student? How strong can a nation be if the nation's people are always in fear? How strong can a nation be if those people that are in fear are so in fear they don't even own weapons? See, I think we should own more weapons and let it be known. There's no doubt in the opinion of the committee, that the National Lawyers Guild attacks on the Federal Bureau of Investigations are part of an overall communist strategy aimed at weakening our nation's defenses against the international communist conspiracy. So again, I ask, why would the nation use that same tactic against their people then? So though those people in that courtroom 8 years ago may not have been of the Lawyers Guild, I still see them doing the exact same thing, and I see them the exact same way. Nothing but communist bastards. If you hire an attorney, it proves you are incompetent. Incompetent of what? Presenting the truth. I don't need anybody else to present the truth in the court, as long as I know the truth. And if you're hiding something from me, then obviously I don't know the truth, and that would show that you are the subversive party. You're the one that's dishonorable. You're the one that has things to hide, not me. The propaganda disseminated by the Guild regarding the FBI is a duplicate of the lying put out by Moscow, as demonstrated by the following broadcast by the Soviet Home Service shortwave network dated February 7, 1950. The center of the police terror organization of the United States is the notorious FBI. This is what they put out in Moscow. This institution was founded in 1908. From the day of its foundation, the FBI became the jailer of the population. The head of this organization is responsible to the United States President and keeps him informed of future plans and results of past activity. The true bosses of the FBI, however, are the 60 families of the American millionaires. All of the activities of the FBI, as well as the rest of the United States government, are directed towards the defense of the interests of these actual rulers of modern America. Interesting how it resounds the same today. I think the report may have been accurate. The FBI has been turned into an organization for intimidating the United States man in the street by means of all forms of violence, blackmail, terror, and other police measures. The monopoly press knows no limit to its praise of the FBI, which was some time ago pronounced by the UP to the greatest national institution of the United States. See, they were calling them monopoly press back then. Basically calling them false news back then, just a different term for false news. Different term for propaganda press. The FBI budget grows yearly. In 1949, it was almost so many dollars. To this must be added the so-called special funds allocated by the president and government, and the generous and certainly not insignificant presence from the monopolies who wish to develop still further the regime of police terror with a view to the final subjugation of the American people. They're getting close, folks. They're getting close. Suppression of progressives. At a time when the United States is the mainstay of the greatest imperialist offensive, the FBI has openly become the tool of hysterical imperialist reaction, determined to suppress all progressive thought in the country. The kings of Wall Street, the FBI, and the United States Department of Justice act in close contact with the ultra-reactionary Committee for the Investigation of Un-American Activities. Bringing us again to today's police, making it sound like the American people are the terrorists, when in fact they're the terrorists. They're the communists. They act like it, and yet somehow people don't see it. I don't see how you don't see that the way these police and these public officials act is just like Hitler's willing executioners. I do not know how you don't see this. So let's get on to the next part. This one here says, conclusion. The Committee on Un-American Activities recommends that the National Lawyers Guild be placed on the Department of Justice Subversive list, and that it be required to register as an agent of a foreign principal. Does that sound like the Foreign Agent Registration Act? Does that sound like that's what they tell these bar administrators that they have? So does it sound like they're foreign principals? They're agents of a foreign principal if they have to register for that Foreign Agent Registration Act? Isn't that saying they're pretty much the same thing? They're following the same goddamn principles. They're foreign and they don't work for us domestically, and that they can impute that, hey, if you're not going to follow our subversive activities, then you can't be represented by us or be associated with us. And yet America wants to let them operate in the American courts. People better start waking up. If they run the courts like a communist party, you probably have a communist party in there. So again, look at that Republican and democracy. The fallacy of the democracy is that very narrow line of balance, 51 to 49. That's all it takes. And that's what they leverage it at. That's all they need. And then the next 4 years, they leverage it just to kind of appease the people. See, they're the ones keeping that balance there. It's only the people that can show the true regulation of a republic over the people in government. This small part, the other 98% is supposed to show their power so that these people stay in their PowerPoint and don't go outside of it. It recommends further that members of the National Lawyers Guild be barred from federal employment, and that the American Bar Association consider the question of whether or not membership in the National Lawyers Guild, a subversive organization, is compatible with admissibility to the American bar. It calls on decent lawyers and those sincerely interested in the liberal principles. Remember they talked about earlier, the latent liberal principles? They're not so latent today, are they, folks? See, we went through the civil rights movement in the 50s, feminist movement in the 60s and 70s. See what we got today? Now we're so liberal, we're expecting that we can go beyond race, color, and gender. That somehow magically there's all these other kind of unicorn type creatures that we have to recognize. How fucking liberal is that? Of American justice to warn the younger members of the bar of the real nature of the guild, an arm of the international communist conspiracy. The Smith Bill, one of the most repressive of a long list of anti-alien measures now hanging fire in Congress, may come up any day. This is an omnibus bill combining all the vicious features of a number of measures and a few of its own. It requires registration and fingerprinting of all aliens, a domestic passport system which unquestionably would involve the whole population. And that's what we see today. Everybody is required to have some kind of ID, driver's license, or passport. That's that Interstate Identification Index held by the FBI and the fingerprint file. Good evening, India Maria. How you doing tonight, sister?
Good evening, Brother Keith.
Dean. Absolutely, I identify as free from government. I'm tired of the government dummies too. I agree. And that's what we need to teach our children. We are free from government. Understand how we beat their record by posing that private journal, a fortiori, something greater, a force majeure, a greater force, a heavenly force, or to combat, because we're not in your war. We come with peace as a prophet unto the nations. So sanctified and ordained, because when we were discharged as a man from our mother's waters, it was done at the behest of his will, because he's the one that wrote his law on my heart with the index finger of his right hand before he formed me in the belly, because that's when he knew me. I'm not going to play any more games, and I don't have any children I can pass it on to myself. So I have to be able to pass it on to you people, and all I can do is hope to impress how important that is. That's what's destroying our nation, is the destruction of our family.
Excuse me, Brother Keith.
Go ahead.
What exactly are we reading right now?
This is, let me go ahead and drop it in the chat again. This is the legal bulwark of the Communist Party from the 81st Congress of 1950, second session, wherein the Congress investigated the Lawyers Guild and determined that they were communist by definition.
Got it. Thank you.
And basically, you know, that's one of the things that got me on this road is, first of all, before we get into that, when I learned about the Electoral College, I realized it wasn't my position to go out and vote, so I never registered to vote. That's what threw me off on the politics thing right away. If I can't actually have a vote that counts, then why would I want to vote? Okay? And so when it comes to this stuff today, I'm not very political about anything. I know how politics work by studying the history. And again, this is one of those elements. Most people today don't know a damn thing about civics because they never got taught that in school. They got a social studies class, and in that social studies class, they may have touched on civics a little bit here and there, but they certainly didn't teach them enough that they could pass a civics test to prove that they were competent in civics. And that's a major problem with our public education system, and people just believing that they're educating those children well enough to go out into an adult world and be safe and be able to protect themselves. And that's why our government has grown so big. We're sending our young children out there without knowing how to protect themselves. They're not being socialized properly. They're full of all these multicultural ideals and think that they can meld and mix in this society. And when they get butthurt, nobody's ever taught them how to deal with truth. It's a confusion mechanism, a distraction, a division to teach our children to just remember certain things. We should be teaching our children that principle about giving a man a fish and you feed him for a day, but if you teach him to fish, he'll learn how to feed himself for a lifetime, and then he can pass it on. You feed a man a fish a day, he comes back the next day, you got to feed him another fish. It makes more sense to teach him to fish, and in that teaching, make sure you remember that he understands the principle isn't that it's to be a selfish lesson, so he just feed himself for the rest of his life. It's that pay it forward thing. And that's what's wrong with this society. Nobody wants to think about anybody else. They want to be self-centered and have this material existence. And then they get frustrated when somebody takes that material existence away from them. I don't give a fuck anymore. Like I said, 8 years ago when all that shit happened, I gave it all up. Went out to the mountains, went down to the Ozarks, and I've learned to do pretty good without material existence away. I've learned to do pretty good without all this convenience. Go ahead, sister.
I've come to realize, Brother Keith, that a lot of people think that because it's it's just one. I'm only one. There's nothing I can do. I get that a lot when I try to share all this information with everyone else.
Yeah, that's one of the things we've got to realize. Like I was saying earlier about self-esteem. We get involved in this popularity contest and everybody thinks they have to have a pat on the shoulder from somebody else to let them know that they're a good being. That should be in your heart already, and that should be developed when we're young. And that's the part that should be encouraged. Like I mentioned the other day about the Heroic Imagination Project. We've been taught to, or grown up in this indoctrination without thinking about anything except to remember things. And that's one of those things that lets our true character come out in our adult stages when we're not taught to think for ourselves. The true character comes out through the emotional side, and it gets all chaotic because they don't know how to keep it in order. If you learn how to think for yourself and have a true thought process, you learn how to put things in order, and it sets the emotions aside because it trains you to think about things in life that you may not be prepared for, so that when they do come upon, your emotions don't get in the way of resolving it. If your emotions get in the way of resolving a problem, it tends to last longer than it should.
I
That's
agree. Yes.
and that drives commerce. I feel you, brother. I feel you. You know, I don't have too many people by my side here, and like I said here lately, my companion's fucking pissing me off. Um, Seems like she wants to support the other people with excuses and lame ideas and stuff because she's caught up in her own cognitive dissonance, and it's really driving my fucking edge.
I,
You know.
I'm the same, brother Keith. I'm over here in Houston, Texas, and I feel all alone. Even when I run into people that seem to be awake and have some kind of knowledge about this, and as you know, my speech problem doesn't really allow me to express myself and explain as I comprehend. So I'm always trying to share things with people, and no one wants to listen. It's easier to just turn the other way and not do the homework, and it's easier to be on TikTok and watching all these dumb videos that just continue to just dumb us down and indoctrinate us even more than it is to just actually do the research. I don't comprehend. I don't understand any of this. This nation, because everyone's an American, right? And we are for the United States, and we're patriots and all this. And you're watching this so-called nation go down, but you refuse to get up and do something about it. And I, okay, I can't find the words.
Well, that's all right. I mean, it's even for me, like I said with my companion, I want to thank Dean Phillips. He says, blessed to have a companion of a similar mindset. And truly, yes. And I'm not saying I don't love my companion, because I do. But there's only so much a man can deal with in trying to make things work. And when it gets this tight and everything and this important, I can't, like I said, I love you, but I don't give a fuck whether you love me back or not. And that goes for my companion. If she wants to sit there and support the neighbors and their insanity and try to come up with excuses for them why they don't want me going across that parking lot, or why the police behave the way they do, or why the people won't accept that there's a process for redemption for the hospital bills and stuff, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck if you don't understand it. That's why I'm doing this. I can explain it to you, but I can't comprehend it for you. So the best way for you to comprehend it is not to believe me, not to believe the neighbor, not to believe the government, and for crying out loud, don't believe your mother. Do your research so you know. And this is the same for anybody else. You come at me with stupid questions, I'm going to give you the most honest answer I can, but be prepared. It might be a little blunt and rude.
I like blunt. I like straightforward people. I don't like people that bullshit me, and I like blunt, brother Keith. That's why I watch and I listen to you and I talk to you.
Well, yeah, and sometimes some people don't understand that, and they think it's anger and hatred and stuff. And no, I have to protect my companion. I can't let her go around by herself acting stupid. She can get herself in trouble. Around me, that ain't going to happen. She knows this. She's been with me basically 14 years in every instance, and she knows the things I'm talking about. I've been absolutely right. She went to court with me during that traffic violation thing, sixth offense possession. She saw what they were doing in court. She knew it wasn't right. She couldn't pinpoint what wasn't right about it, but she could see it wasn't right. And as I've gone and shown her the various different things, she sees more and more. But she's still, she's even older than I am, so she's caught up in the cognitive dissonance a lot more than I am. And she's willing to deal with the comfort and convenience more than I am. She's a woman. She wants it. She likes it. People pamper her and will do so the rest of her life until she maybe gets into a retirement home and then they don't like wiping her ass. People get kind of rude about that kind of shit. She ain't going to like that.
No, they're not kind to us. I mean, once they get us in there, uh, they become their prisoner.
Well, yeah, that's kind of what that Stanford Prison Project kind of tends to tell me about things like that. A lot of these people, they're good people, but there are people in that society that have that job because they need a job, and they just don't give a fuck. And those are the people I'm concerned about. I don't care where it's at. I don't care if it's an old folks' home or down at the local courthouse. Those are the people that I'm just doing my job. That's
Yes.
the problem.
Yes, I'm just doing my job, and also the people that just, for just greed, plain greed is what's going on. Everyone's just selling out because, the paycheck becomes bigger. The bonuses are also amazing, and they don't care that they throw you, your brother in Christ, your brother and sister in Christ. They don't care. Greed has just taken over.
Yeah, and that's why I say everything is about the comfort and convenience. And I have this little thing I talk about people that are caught up in that. They like to sit at home in their comfort zone, watching that boob tube on the couch, munching down on the processed foods and drinking the poisoned drinks. And then they hear the sirens and they see the lights, so they peek their head out. They look down a couple blocks down. The police are arresting one of the neighbors. They go back to doing what they're doing. The next night, they're sitting in front of the TV on the couch, eating the processed foods, drinking the poison drinks. They see the lights and sirens again, and lo and behold, they look out. The police are down at the other end of the block arresting somebody else. The next night, they look out and they're just across the street. The next night, they look out and they're getting the neighbor. When do you think they're going to come after you?
Yes.
It's a pattern of practice, and they're running out of people to put in jail.
I was the same. I don't, I'm not proud to admit it, but I was the same. I thought that the police were the answer to everything. The neighbors acting rude. They have the music up all night. They're drinking, all this stuff. I was the same way. Well, let's call the police and take care of it. A few months ago, I had men that I had no idea who they are, show up at my door and just take pictures late at night. And it seemed very suspicious, of course. And as a woman, single woman, alone, disabled, of course it concerned me. What are these men doing, taking pictures of my front door all the time? Very suspicious. So I told my daughter about it, and my roommate, and one of them said, call the police. It reported. But first of all, there was no crime committed. They didn't try to harm me. They didn't try to do anything. And second of all, I just tried explaining to them how we can continue to do this, as long as there was no harm being done to me, or anyone in this home. We can turn, and we got to try to solve things ourselves, come together as a community, help each other out. And we can't be turning to them for everything because we're nothing but profit to them. um
Absolutely, yeah. We are the feedlots for them. We are feeding them literally.
Yes, and I did mention also. I said, these men, they're not trying to harm me. I said, no, thank God, of course, and I pray, of course, that they don't. They're not trying to harm me. I said, for all we know, they have small warrants, which they shouldn't have. And this is how we continue to feed them. We continue to turn each other in when sometimes, maybe they all back child support. I mean, it just doesn't matter. The list goes on and on and on, and this is how they continue to screw us over. They're not there to help us. They're there to screw us. So I don't do it anymore. I don't rely on them. I rely on myself, and I do what I can to just just keep myself safe and just, okay, I'm out of words. Sorry.
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier. There comes a point where, you got to behave yourself to a certain degree. There's different levels of how far you can reach beyond in this zone of disrespecting when it comes to these officers alongside the road. At their behest, be as smart as you can, and I'm not going to say compliant, but very strategic about what you're doing, and make sure you don't slip up. They get very violent, and they use their job and their stress as part of the reason to do so. And the safety of public, or the safety of officers, comes first. Okay, so when you're interacting with them, it's not quite so kosher to be fingering them and cussing and swearing at them, calling them communist bastards, like I did in the court. In the courtroom setting, there's a camera up there, and it's a little bit more public and accessible to other people. I got a little out of hand, but at the same time, there's a difference venue. When you're out in the public and that man's got a gun on his side and he's going to use his own discretion, better be careful what you do, because you could end up dead, and he's going to use his discretion to do so and then explain it off the way he wants to. And everybody will believe him.
Yes, they police each other. Sometimes it does feel, Brother Keith, as if we're fighting I can't think of the word, I can't think of words. Sometimes it does feel like we're fighting an endless battle.
Well, that's
Because
what it's meant to be.
when you see your neighbors, and I'm not giving up, I'm not, regardless of my disabilities and everything, I'm not giving up. But when you see your own neighbors turning on you, continue to turn on each other, the office, for example, where I live, at the apartments, that it's just, how do we get above this? How do we continue to just, I can't find the words.
Well, it comes down to just that, sister. The words, the language, the communication. We have to get better at it. And I understand you've got an impediment of some sort, but the general population, again, particularly the ones that are supposedly bright enough to be these professionals filling these public offices and stuff, damn well better be able to prove it. And when they totally blatantly just ignore our communications, that proves their incompetency, their ignorance, their will to just disobey policy, or the fact that they are, again, negligent somewhere, and the fact that they don't know when they should. So, again, it's very disheartening to see. Again, like I said, I do see it getting better, but I do still see a lot of Hitler's willing executioners,
Yes.
But on the point of, I do see it getting better, I do happen to notice not just more videos of officers coming out and expressing their integrity and wanting to change things, and some of them I feel it in their heart, as well as I see a lot more of these officials in various different capacities, whether they be judges or police officers, attorneys, teachers, going to jail for various different things, all the way from pedophilia to being drug and alcohol addicts themselves, trying to teach our kids while they're high on drugs or drunk. And that's just as pathetic as any officer pulling over somebody and treating them inhumanely. How the hell, again, if we're supposed to be this mighty nation of smart thinkers, how are we smart thinkers, first of all, with 7th and 8th grade reading comprehension as an average, and then knowing that our teachers are going in and teaching our children while they're drunk and stoned? No wonder.
And there are about 1 million genders as well.
Yeah. So anyway, we've come to the end of tonight's stream. I hope everybody enjoyed and understands that when the scripture says trust no man, it means it. Hiring an attorney proves that you're incompetent of that, and that you're willing to trust that attorney when you shouldn't. I urge you to seek a higher counsel, a greater truth, a force majeure, a fortiori, or to combat, something peaceful to defeat one's opponent without fighting is of supreme excellence. So what do you guys got to say on the way out?
Brother Keith, quick question. When someone signs with an attorney, what is it? I forgot what it's called. I know it's called we're signing over our.
Giving them a power of attorney?
There you go, power of attorney.
What about it?
Okay, it escaped my mind. Sorry,
Okay.
never mind.
Okay. What do you got, Mitch?
Nothing to add. Just thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, appreciate it. I
Thank you,
haven't
Brother
seen
Keith.
you. Bet anytime, sister. I haven't seen you go live here lately, so my apologies if you have. I try to catch you whenever you do, brother.
No, I haven't had any problems lately, so I've just been
Chilling.
trying to
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right, man. I'll catch you
again,
soon.
I'll be back tomorrow. Sometime, I don't know when. It's not my regular day, but I'm going to put something out tomorrow, so be watching for it.
Cool. Thanks, man.
All right. And you guys know me. I love you, but I don't give a rat's ass whether you love me back. And that's say I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you don't respect me. That's on you. So may God bless you. Have a good night. Remember, hit that like, share, and subscribe button on the way out. And if you feel like sharing some love, tag that PayPal button. Anything is appreciated. God bless. Bye now.